NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg held a press conference earlier today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Brussels. During the conference, Stoltenberg made it very clear NATO is leaving the option to expand its borders on the table. Russia said NATO entering Ukraine is a red line. RT's Charlotte Dubinsky has the latest out of Paris.
There was an awful lot of information to digest. I'll try and take you through it now. He talked a lot about what he sees as being a pattern of Russian aggression and said that NATO will continue to do everything that it can to support NATO allies, NATO members. He was talking at the same time as holding the podium with the Ukrainian president. Just to point out, Ukraine isn't currently a member of NATO, although it would like to join the alliance. Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO stands with Ukraine. It supports its sovereignty and it supports Ukraine's right to defend that sovereignty, to defend its own country's borders and its territory. And he said that NATO would continue to give Ukraine practical support to be able to do this. Now, he said that NATO support for Ukraine is not a threat to Russia. His direct words on that. And he said any decision about NATO increasing its membership, enlarging to include Ukraine, will be something that is solely taken by NATO members themselves. Let's have a listen to what else he had to say.
NATO has proven over the last years that our open door policy is not only something we support in words, but also in deeds, partly by inviting two new countries, Montenegro and North Macedonia, to become members. So we have enlarged the alliance over the last few years with two new members, despite protests from Russia. And also we are supporting Ukraine in Ukraine's efforts to come closer to NATO membership.
Well, he also talked about what he described as being Russia's substantial military buildup. He said over the last few weeks there have been tens of thousands of armoured vehicles, personnel, army vehicles generally moving into the area, and he said that that doesn't appear to be subsiding in any way at all. He said that this buildup is provocative and this destabilizes and undermines Europe itself. So we're just getting some noise around us, but that will go in a moment. And he talked about any further aggression being something that will have severe consequences if that is against Ukraine. Now, Washington, for example, we talk about military build-up on the borders between Ukraine and Russia and in that region. Washington is actually at the moment sending fighter jets to Romania. These are fighter jets that will be able to monitor the seas and patrol the area close to the Russian border. We also know that Ukraine has been increasing its military fold near the border territories as well. Now, for its part, Russia says it is not about to invade Ukraine. That is the line over and over that we are hearing from the Kremlin.
And former UK MP George Galloway has been monitoring the situation. He's joining us now. So, George, let's begin with the explosive language coming from Ukraine's ambassador to your home, the UK, Vadim Pristaiko. He was also once the ambassador to NATO, we should note. He said, referring to Vladimir Putin, he said this, quote, "He wants one thing, Ukraine to cease existing." How dangerous is that rhetoric?
Very dangerous, very reckless, and it's very important for your viewers in particular to know that Stoltenberg and the Ukrainian ambassador to London are threatening the world with America's army, much in the way that Mussolini used to threaten the world with Hitler's army. Stoltenberg doesn't have an army. Norway doesn't have an army. Stoltenberg is a hairdresser. He's not even a soldier. This idea that a tailor's dummy can stand up in Brussels and edge the world closer to war is simply ridiculous, not least because the United States has already ruled out putting boots on the ground in Ukraine. So I'm not afraid of NATO. It has no means of waging war without the United States Army, and that's already been ruled out. The big problem is, in Putin's words, the Ukraine is being stuffed full of weapons, and the airwaves are being stuffed full of war propaganda to justify the stuffing full of weapons. And eventually, as we've discussed here before, and even figures, neocon figures accept this, that an accident can happen. A commander can let loose a Javelin anti-tank missile, or something could go awry. And before we know it, we are tumbling down a slope that it will be very difficult to climb back from.
Absolutely. Now, George, as we know, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Brussels today. Stoltenberg already calling Russia the clear aggressor in this, and said Russia needs to change its behavior and stop violating international agreements. Isn't that quite hypocritical coming from NATO, seeing as the bloc itself has not abided by international agreements?
In fact, withdrawn from them. The NATO alliance countries withdrew from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, from the Open Skies Treaty. And as for aggression, you know, it's really rich. You move your army, navy, and air force to Russia's border and accuse Russia of aggression. If the Russian army was in Mexico and Canada, and the Russian Navy and Air Force were patrolling up and down your shores, you'd have something to say about it. The world almost exploded in nuclear war in 1961 because Cuba had missiles on it. Yet the missiles are the least of what the West has moved to the borders of Russia. And China, I should add, because exactly the same is true in China. While the people moving the military assets to somebody else's border, thousands of miles away, are accusing the person they're threatening of being threatening. You couldn't make it up. You really couldn't make this up.
George, I think the kids call that gaslighting. Now, the German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, is leading the call to block operations of Nord Stream 2 if there was more Russian aggression on Ukraine. Why would she deprive her own people of natural gas in the dead of winter? And do you think Olaf Scholz will comply?
Well, I'm afraid Germany is in the hands of a lesser man now. Angela Merkel was that Iron Lady, if you like, that had a far keener understanding of Germany's national interest and also a longer folk memory, you know. She lived through the years of divided Germany. She even lived in East Germany. She knew more than today's politicians know about the tangled history, to say the least, between Germany and Russia. In fact, Hitler would still be jackbooting over the German people if the Russian army had not liberated them. The German army killed tens of millions of people in Russia in the lifetime of some people that are still alive today. It's very important to remember these things. But now we have this green social democratic alliance that would appear, on this issue at least, to be more pliable to the United States than Angela Merkel was. Her people have not spoken yet, of course. And in this bleak midwinter, the idea that Germany should play politics with gas supplies, the very opposite, by the way, of what they used to say Russia would do. They're the ones playing politics with gas supplies, and it could all rebound very badly on their people. Gas prices are higher than they have ever been. Temperatures are plummeting, I can assure you, in Europe. And the idea of interrupting gas supplies to please Jens Stoltenberg, the hairdresser in Brussels, is really very difficult to understand.
Great analysis, as always. Our friend George Galloway, thank you.